Yeah, Black Muslims' influence on Muslims in America, on music in America, I'm sorry. It should have been called The Roots of Pop Music, actually, to be frank. So I'm gonna do like an overview of my studies I've been doing for the last 10 years. It's impossible to give you everything in the next 15 minutes. I can give you an overview, but if you have questions, come afterwards and just give it to me. Oh, we have a panel discussion? Okay, we have a panel discussion after this, so whatever questions you might have that I might miss, just ask it. Because it's going to be an interview, so just bear with me. Next slide. So I'll go over 3 main things. West Africa and blues, jazz and Islam, and I'm going to give you a few examples after that. Next slide, please. So when you think of blues, you think of like Mississippi blues, Delta, B.B. King, and the other greats that come from the South. But seldom do you think about the Islamic influences that encouraged it. So, like with the American pop music, it started from the blues, right? So we're gonna actually start from blues, church, and then pop music, things like that. But that's another story. So, what the people who are captives here, what they were able to do with the instruments or with their knowledge of music was to express the sorrow and happiness at the same time and hopes for the future. So you could hear these in different forms of like field hollers and things like that, that eventually made its way into church and then eventually pop music. Next slide, please. So like I said, West African music is characterized by a strong emphasis on drums. Am I creating a shadow? I'm tall, so sometimes. So the emphasis on polyrhythm, collective participation. Everyone knows what polyrhythm is?
No.
Okay, polyrhythm is you have a beat, right? And then you have something that's off that beat, right? And if you know a little bit about jazz, it's about polyrhythm. It's different rhythms at one time, and from the outside it might sound chaotic, but at the same time there's some sort of cohesiveness with it at the same time. So this had, when they brought it over here, due to the fact that a large percentage of enslaved Africans were Muslims, some people say up to a third, there would be obviously some influence on the particular styles like chanting, improvisation, and polyrhythm. Next slide, please. So it started in the early 1900s, and then it developed onto the second post-World War II until now. But if we can, I'm going to show you this link right here. I don't know if it's working or not. Can you click that link at the bottom? Yeah. So basically, it's just going to give you an overview of how it started in the early 19th century.
20th century.
20th century, sorry.
What we find another very famous Muslim arriving on the shores of New York into Harlem. In 1918, we find Sheikh Daoud Faisal, who actually starts the first Black Sunni Muslim mission inside of New York. Now this is actually 1918. He and his wife start not only the Muslim mission, which is a non-profit organization, they also start the Bronx Mosque. So his wife, which is Lady Khadija, also starts the Muslim Ladies Society. And so this Ladies Society was known that not only they would have classes together, but they would also have like womanhood training. Now both Daoud Faisal and his wife were responsible for leading this movement together. Something very unique about Daoud Faisal and his wife. They were both jazz musicians. This was really significant because in this time, this is the height of the Harlem Renaissance, and they become responsible for a mass conversion of jazz musicians into Islam. As a matter of fact, So many jazz musicians became Muslim that it became known amongst the community that those Muslims who had converted to Islam actually enjoyed a higher status than some of their other counterparts. They could get into certain restaurants, into certain stores. And why is that? Because they were known for having a grasp of the Arabic language. And when they would speak it to each other, then they would oftentimes mistake them for not being African American, thinking that they were from somewhere else, allowing them to enter into places that they normally would not have. This level of freedom, of movement, began to become something popular, and people began to associate Islam with not only intelligence, but Islam with a higher status.
Okay,
And so this began to spread.
Go back to that slide. This is all improv, y'all, so bear with us. But so if sorry, if you notice what she was saying, what she didn't cover is what was the role of Black Muslim jazz musicians, and what was their role in establishing Islam in the community. Basically, these musicians, these imams that were jazz musicians, they were instrumental in cementing Islam in Black communities. If you guys had a chance to watch Mona Hayter's PBS special that came out, I think last year, basically it was a road trip. She did a road trip with her husband, and she interviewed different people, different parts of the country, like the imams. And there were two different episodes where the imam mentioned that it was actually the jazz musicians that cemented Islam in the Black community. So that's, so she didn't say that, but you know, knowing that history, I just want to bring that up. Next slide, please. So another thing she said, what it offered the jazz musician when they converted was a connection with the world, right? Instead of being subjected to the notions of the oppressors of who they were able to self-identify. Right? They were able to self-identify and actually fight against racism at the same time. You know, some of them developed communities, some of them studied Arabic, some even went to Hajj. So this is a quote from one historian, Goldman. Islam was a force directly opposed to the deterioration of mind and body through either spiritual or physical deterrents. Many musicians were searching for a foundation of life. Islam taught that one should keep his body clean and healthy. It elevated the mind from the morass of American oppression and the myth about Black people. Next slide, please. So now we jump a little bit further, like we went from early 20th century now to post World War II. There was a time, like this first quote, that many Muslims were in the front of bebop movements of jazz in the 1940s and 50s. Now, if we look at this phenomenon, it caught wind of the pop of the wider culture. Like, there was a time when there were so many Muslims in the jazz scene that if you were Black and played jazz, they assumed that you were Muslim. It's an automatic assumption. It was so prevalent. Like, so either they thought either it was true or you were Muslim adjacent. What I mean by Muslim adjacent, you had some sort of Islamic influence that was on you, and it exhibited through the music that you played, or the way you dressed, or the names that you gave yourself. Next slide, please. Oh, before you do that, so a couple of luminaries in jazz. Anybody know about Art Blakey? Do you know he's Muslim? Now you know. So that was the name he gave himself, Abdullah ibn Buhaina. Kenny Dorham, not as familiar, but he went by Abdul Hamid. And we'll go over some names as we continue down the slides. I wish there's, I only have 15 minutes of this, but there's a list of names I can give you that we could probably go over after we finish it. Next slide, please. One such person that not only defined himself, but actually redefined the genre was Yusuf Lateef. obviously Muslim, right? Now, a little sidetrack for a minute. So the word jazz, I'm using very lightly because the people who played the music, that's what they call jazz, did not like the word jazz, right? It's a very derogatory term that was used for people who played the music. It was like a throwaway term. So some people came up with their own terms, like John Coltrane would call it cosmic music, Miles Coltrane would call it social music. Now it's called Black classical music these days. Yusuf Lateef came up with the term, it's a mouthful, but it really resonates of what the music is all about. He called it auto physio-psychic music. Basically, it's music that's derived from a person's intelligence, his intellect, his physical self, and his spiritual self. Now, as simple as that is, I've been doing studies on this particular methodology and philosophy for like the last, 3-4 years. It's, as simple as it sounds, it gets more deeper because what it does is recenters the narrative of jazz from its commercialization to its more African and spiritual roots. Next slide, please. Another person is Abdullah Ibrahim, South African. He's another person who he exemplified his art through his spirituality and sound through a more of a theosophic way. Even more than Yusuf Lateef on the forefront, but he explained his methodology. He explained his methodology in a more spiritual and theosophic way, very unapologetic, basically. Next slide, please. Okay. How much time do I have? 2 minutes? 5 minutes? Wait, because this is a kicker right here, y'all. I'm doing John Coltrane, right? See your eyebrows raised up. Why is John Coltrane a part of this? Pay attention. The 4 band members. Most of them Muslims from Philadelphia. So he had a lot of Islamic influences, particularly his relationship with Malcolm X, which is a story that's not talked about enough, and the parallels with their history. If we can hit the Psalms link right there, or just go to the next slide, actually. So this is a liner notes of Love Supreme. If you were to read it through the lens of a Muslim mind and eyes, it sounds like a Muslim prayer. It has all the features of what you would think the Fatiha, which is the opening chapter of the Quran, is trying to say. I wish I had added another slide to this because I actually translated this into Arabic, just to see how it looked, right? But actually, when I did it, it looked like a Muslim prayer, right? So all the things that he's saying, like, thank you, God, peace, there's none other, God is, it is so beautiful. And what I'm hearing from the elders, and what I'm reading from luminaries like Yusuf Lateef and John Coltrane had a really strong connection. He was saying that John Coltrane was actually playing Islamic songs. He could see right through it. In their conversations, kind of like rebuilding. Next slide, please. So this is this conversation is actually coming out of an exhibit I did a couple years ago, which is still active in Mississippi right now. Basically, I gave chronological time frame of the influence of Black Muslims in jazz. I put Malcolm X as a center point because it's a center point between John Coltrane, like and Mary Baraka, and what happened after that. So you see people in there like, how many of you guys knew that Pharoah Sanders was Muslim? How can you not know it? Some of his albums were named after Quranic verses. Sumun Bukmun Umyun. Tawheed, which means the oneness of God. So some of them were like unapologetic in their Black Muslims. Some of them let the music speak for themselves. Some of them left clues. So Pharoah Sanders was one of them. Of course, you have McCoy Tyner, which is actually John Coltrane's piano player, Art Blakely right there. I have Alice Coltrane right here. She's not Muslim, she's Muslim adjacent. So this thing is about Muslims and Muslim adjacentness, and the influence of Islam and Muslims on jazz, and the genres that come out of it. Okay, I got one more kicker for you guys. You guys want to call it Santana?
Yeah.
I ain't saying it's Muslim. But he has a song on there, which is his #1 song ever. Well, one of the songs that came out of his best-selling record, which was Supernatural. You know, when they had all those pop musicians. One song by, I think it's called Put Your Lights On, with Everlast. Did you guys notice he said the tahlil at the end? La ilaha illallah. So, I didn't know what that was. Thank you. Oh yeah, next slide please. So these are some of the resources you guys can pull this information from, which I got it from. I would really recommend the second book. It's probably the best research on Muslim subject, and Muslims and jazz, Black Muslims and jazz. Mysticism of sound and music. Black Crescent. And the next slide, please. Abdullah Ibrahim, the gentleman you saw in one of the slides. Sylvian Diop, What Islam Gave the Blues, and the Method on How to Perform Artificial Psychic Music by Dr. Yusuf Abdul Latif. Next slide, please. And that's some information you can, or this, some links you can get in contact with me or ask some questions, or whatever. Thank you.